Hey, welcome everybody. This is the Nick and Nick podcast. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is powered by Royalty Roofing and Renovations. Crown your home and your commercial property with Royalty Roofing and Renovations. As you know, on the Nick and Nick podcast, we love having guests on the cast. Today we have a special guest with us. He's going to tell us a little bit about his journey. Let me introduce you to, well, you know, on the podcast, we love talking about, you know, hearing people's stories, their journeys of where they've come from, how they got to where they are, the process that they had to go through to get there, and, you know, some of the principles that they learned along the way and some of the people that they met along the way that helped them navigate that process.
Sure.
So today we have a special guest. His name's Josh Morrison. Josh, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure thing. My name's Josh Morrison, and I am with a company right now called Nuts and Bolts Incorporated. I say right now, I've been with them since 1994, but there was, and it is a family business. Grew up, went through high school, graduated, all that good stuff. Had a really decent upbringing, but ended up getting caught up in addiction.
Oh, okay.
And
hey, but don't spoil it.
Sure.
We'll get to that because that's the nuts and bolts of
it. Is
today. What we're going to get into is the nuts and bolts of JAMIN Josh's journey.
Yeah.
I want to get into those in a little bit.
Sure.
However, I want to start with, tell us what you're doing now at Nuts and Bolts. I know there's a bit of a story to it.
Sure.
It's a family company. It's been around for, I think I read almost 40 years. Is that right?
Yep.
Something now you recently took a new role in the company.
So started working there in 1994.
You did?
Yep.
They started it when?
1986.
Okay.
Started just doing warehouse stuff. Then my dad, he was always into sales. He had come from the electrical distribution side.
Sure, Dick, right?
Dick. I was born in Michigan. My sister was born in Pittsburgh. She's 4 years older than me. Dad had met my mom up in South Dakota when he was stationed at a radar station. Then he married her. They were both very young. She was actually 16 years old when they got married. I think he was about 2 years older than her. Then it was literally the following week he got sent over to Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of one of those things where they didn't know each other very long. They started dating, fell in love, wanted to get married before he had to go over to Vietnam. But you can probably imagine most marriages and relationships that start that way and run into a quick marriage probably don't last, and theirs lasted 54 years.
Oh, wow.
So, he came back. He ended up getting a job at a steel company out in Pittsburgh, and then ended up going to work for Westinghouse, an electrical company. My sister was born there. I was born in Flint, Michigan.
Okay.
Which my brother-in-law's kind of got a joke about that. It was that Flint, Michigan water that maybe turned out the way it went. Jokes on him, though. That water didn't go bad until like 10 years ago. Yeah, this was 1970s for crying out loud. But so, and then we lived in West Virginia for about 4 years. Moved out to Nebraska when I was 8 years old. Okay. So all that moving around happened when I was relatively young. Still have a lot of good memories of West Virginia.
Been around the block a little bit. Now you're the, said you work for Nuts and Bolts. Is it Nuts and Bolts America?
So Nuts and Bolts America is our website, or was our website. Okay. It's actually, you can get there from there, or nbisupply.com, which is a lot shorter, obviously. When I graduated high school, I started managing a Subway sandwich place off 156th and Center, which Subway was a lot less complicated then. You had one kind of cheese and two kinds of bread, and But it was just a great place to work at. But I think the assumption was that sooner or later I'm going to go work for mom and dad.
Sure.
This was 1994-ish, and I did.
Because your sister never did, right?
My sister did for a little while she was going through college.
Okay.
It was kind of a way for her to make a little bit of money while she was going to school at UNO, and she did eventually end up graduating. She was a buyer for a clothing company. She was able to do a lot of traveling there. Sometime around 1999 or so, I'll kind of get into that a little bit later, but I am the vice president of Nuts and Bolts now. Dad passed away about 5 years ago. Mom is still
unexpectedly. I remember.
It was very.
I remember
sudden.
The funeral. I remember the everything about that.
Sure.
That time and season.
You know, it's one of those things where was it painful? Well, yes, it was, obviously. Dad was 74. Would have loved to have had some good years left.
And he was the president at the time, or
absolutely.
What, CEO, owner?
So he was the president. He was kind of the big boss guy. I had been running the company as vice president for quite a while.
Oh, you had? Okay.
Even at that point.
Okay.
But as sad as it was when Dad passed away, me and my mom and my sister it seemed like maybe it brought us closer together. Right. I mean, that whole week up to planning his funeral, it was just, things worked out great. And here's the deal. He was literally, we sell bolts. So,
right.
A box of bolts weigh about 50 pounds. They're not light. And so Friday, he was, putting some boxes in his truck, gonna go see a customer, feeling fine. Saturday, he started feeling not great. So he decided he's gonna stay home and get some rest. This was the weekend, it was probably December 28th of 2019.
Wow.
Sunday morning, Mom gets up and goes to church. He's like, I think I'm just gonna stay home. When she got home from church, he goes, I'm having a hard time breathing. And my dad, long as I've known him, has never gone to the hospital. And Mom was like, we're going to the hospital. Right. So they go to the hospital. I stopped up to visit him. And, he was just kind of answering questions and stuff. Seemed like he was doing real well. I ended up heading home, and around 9:30 or so at night, my mom called me. He was in cardiac arrest, just all of a sudden.
Hadn't had any heart issues?
Nothing, no. So we headed up there.
Well, that's what they say from a health standpoint. The most common sign of a heart attack is no sign or symptom at all.
Right,
it's
isn't that
just
crazy?
Sudden death.
So they were able to revive him that
They did,
time.
okay.
They were, and they scheduled him for a surgery the following evening. He never actually woke back up.
Okay.
So the following evening, when they took him into the operating room, he passed away. So on the one hand, yes, sad. On the other hand, he was literally feeling good on Friday.
Right.
Went into the hospital and died the day later.
You probably remember your last conversation with him.
You always want to be able to say goodbye, but at the same time, I'm like, well, and here's the other thing that ended up being kind of a blessing in disguise. While they were in the hospital, they did some blood work on that Sunday. Okay. And they found some stuff that they thought was going to end up being cancer. Okay. And I can tell you, just knowing my dad, and he was a pretty prideful man.
Yeah, strong.
He wouldn't have wanted to go through. It sounded like 2020 wasn't going to be a very good year for him. So, and I'm not saying that, God took him out quickly or anything like that. It just was a pretty cool blessing. And here's the other thing. I had just celebrated, 20 years clean and sober the month before that. Wow. We had taken a vacation like we'd never taken before in October. Mom and Dad, me, Hannah and the kids stayed home. Okay. My sister, her husband and kids stayed home.
To where'd you go? Isla Mujeres?
We did take a day trip over to Isla, but we were in Cancun and met up with my dad's sister and her husband, my uncle, and a cousin of mine and his wife. Had this amazing trip. Wow. Literally just had almost a storybook.
The trip of a lifetime.
It was amazing. And we got to do all of those things. Dad lived through Christmas. He was incredibly healthy. And died on December 30th.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of silver lining to that thing.
Wow,
for sure.
That had to be tough. I can't imagine going through that. I still have my dad. He's going to be 90 years old next year.
Gosh.
So I'm grateful for that. However, but I'm sure as the male in the family, the old male, or the
Sure.
Now all of a sudden, this company, I don't know at what level Nuts and Bolts was at the time of his passing.
Sure.
At what level were they at that time, in terms of?
We had actually gone through several years of growth, and really good growth.
Exponential.
Too. When he passed away, the company was in as good of a position as it had ever been to that point. Mm-hmm. Now, COVID hit literally right after. And our attitude was, oh my gosh, if we can break even, we're happy. Our sales were down about 7% in 2020, which to us, we're like, we're winning.
Amazing.
There's nothing wrong with this. We're actually profitable. So. And then 2021, things just took off.
Oh, yeah. Tell us a little bit about that. Because now 2020 is when you take the reins. Is it you or is it your mom? I know your wife. We got to give shout out to Hannah. We got to give her some cred somewhere.
No, my wife is amazing. And my wife has actually been at Nuts and Bolts for, Ben is 17, he'll be 18, and Layla's. So my wife has been working at Nuts and Bolts for somewhere between 13 and 15 years. She's kind of in charge of all the receivables. So any payments come in go to her. Today it's April 1st, so she was kind of in charge of balancing the end of the month for March and everything, which is always a pretty big task and everything.
Right.
She's really good at what she does. She's also really good at, our team, I can't even say enough about our team. Right. Our people are unbelievable.
So how many is on your team currently?
I think between us as owners, I think we're at 40 right now.
Okay.
My warehouse manager, Mike, he's wonderful. He's got like 20 guys under him, also in recovery.
Okay.
I think he's got about 18 years.
Oh, yeah.
Our receiving manager, Charles, also in recovery, got a bunch of years too. And so Hannah is really good at communicating with people and really getting down on their level.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Now, if you've met my wife, which I know you
Pretty
have,
direct.
more than once, sure, she doesn't have much of a filter, which has actually served us pretty well most of the time. It's great because there's times where if we're going out with a supplier and I haven't had a real close relationship with, she's very good at being able to fill the conversation.
I'm sure she is.
There are literally vendors I've known for 20 years that she just met and she knows them better than I do within the first hour. So, but yeah, and then Mom is still technically the president of the company. Okay. She comes in on Mondays and Thursdays. Usually leaves just a little bit after lunchtime. Make sure that everybody's paying their bills on time and all of that stuff. And the company itself has been amazing. Now in 2021, it was kind of a strange situation. I don't know if you want me to go into this now. We got approached by a company that wanted to buy us.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So if you own a business, and especially in distribution, you get approached to sell on a pretty regular basis. A lot of times it's a company that's just in charge of acquisitions, and their job is to try to find companies that are for sale.
They're just investing in.
And we've never even sat down with one of them. And I'm not sure what happened, but this time got a call. I asked about the name of the company. They were a company out of Rockford, Illinois. And I looked, and they were a relatively small business, 3 locations, I think, in the U.S. and 2 in Mexico.
So it wasn't an investment firm. It was a nuts and bolts, or
it was a fastener company
that was looking to acquire.
Yeah, they were trying to spread out, and what they wanted to do was make sure that any company they bought had a good culture.
Right.
And we do. I mean, there's no secret about it. We got to know, and they're a family-owned company.
Okay.
They came out, we started talking a few numbers. And to be honest, we probably to a fault didn't know what our company was worth.
Right.
So when they threw out a number that we considered a pretty good number,
right.
we were like, okay, well, let's start talking. Then they came out and we met the son, his name was Adam, and his dad's name was Bill. And then Bill had a brother, and they were kind of the owners of the company.
Yeah, they came in town a couple times, didn't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And, first we had a couple of, Zoom calls and stuff, and they came out, and we just hit it off well. And then they wanted to have a little bit of time with our people. Okay. Just to kind of talk to them one-on-one without us. Then they wanted us to make a trip out to Rockford and to be able to talk to their people. Yeah. Just so that we could see that their people were happy. It's kind of
like a marriage that you're getting into.
It is.
Because if that would have happened, you would have stayed on for a period of time through transition.
They wanted me to sign a contract to stay on for at least 5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they were a lot of good things. We really agreed to all of the points of us selling, them acquiring. I believe that the process involved almost 500 things. We both had our accounting
attorneys,
Oregon. The whole thing. So we ended up going out to Rockford. Spent a couple days out there. It was my sales manager, our warehouse manager, and our top salesman. Okay. Just to kind of see how they operate.
Did Hannah go?
Hannah did not. Their commission structure was a little bit different than ours. We actually liked ours, so they said, okay, well, we'll leave it that way for 3 years and then revisit. Okay. Because ultimately, we're going to become part of them. Right. Had dinner at the president's house, a big group of about 20 of us or so, and just really left there feeling like this is a good thing. As time went on, so we were supposed to close. It's the end of 2021, and we're going to try to close this thing on December 31st. That way take over ownership on January 1st. It'll be nice and clean.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're in November, and Mom had ultimately left it up to me.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
She
Mom
was letting you make the decision.
She
on
was.
whether this is something.
She really did want to sell.
Because she would have probably bowed out.
Yeah, they were like, well, what are you going to do?
Right.
Jeannie, she's just like, I'm going to ride off into the sunset. Like, hey, more power to her. Mom's put in her time. I mean, she's done she actually went to work at Nuts and Bolts before my dad did.
Oh, wow.
So my mom was working in accounting and Dad was over at Westinghouse. Well, this company was not going to make any money for a long time.
Nuts and Bolts was existing before you...
It had actually operated under a different name.
Okay.
Dad at first bought half of this company. Then when Mom went to work for it after the deal was already done, she's like, oh, Dick, we haven't seen the whole picture.
Oh, boy.
And, as it turned out, the other owner my dad always liked to say he came into his money the old-fashioned way. He inherited it.
Okay.
So he would kind of buy companies and play with them for a little while and then just move on. So there was a big break-in. They took everything of value, whether it was an inside job or not, remains to be seen. I feel like I probably was. But so, the owner at that time, the other owner, I just said, Dick, let's just let the bank take this company back. It isn't worth anything. And, my dad, whether this was true or not, he's like, look, Jim, we both signed for this thing.
Right.
And my dad's thing is, I've got my whole life on the line here. I mean, every penny I've ever saved is in here. And he goes, you've got the deeper pockets, so you're probably the one they're going to come after. So apparently, against his attorney's wishes, he went ahead and sold my mom and dad the rest of the company.
Oh, wow.
Which I can't imagine it was for much because the company was losing money at the time. And Dad said, if we're going to make this work, I got to leave Westinghouse. And, it was scary for a little while. My dad, though, has just always been, he was always one of the hardest working people I ever knew. And he was willing to put in as much time as he needed to put in.
To get this thing going?
To get it going. And he did. They did. It was crazy because they had borrowed money from First National Bank and they were able to pay it back so quickly that they had questions on how it all went down. But the fastener industry is a very good company. It's strange because people don't really realize what all goes into it. We've got amazing people. Our sales force is just outstanding. I feel like our customer service guys are second to none.
Yeah, people like that just don't show up.
So we've got 3 people in inside sales. Okay. The one with the least amount of time has 19 years with us. Oh, wow. So,
That's a good sign.
The other 2 are coming up on 30. So, it's wonderful. And, if I say something and it sounds like I'm bragging or boasting, this is me boasting in the Lord.
Sure.
But, so, 2021, well, I'll get back to that part. We're almost ready to sell.
Getting ready to pull the trigger.
And it just kind of occurred to me that there's no going back. I mean, once January 1st comes, the company's no longer belonging to you and your mom. Correct. Now you're working for somebody else. And I started to have some second thoughts. And we got on a Zoom call with the other guys. And I just said, guys, I think we're not gonna sell. And they were incredibly disappointed, but they did not disrespect us in the least. And one of the things that one of the brothers said is, it's like, look, Josh, we're incredibly disappointed. But he said, we're not going anywhere. He said, and we're going to be interested in purchasing Nuts and Bolts if you ever change your mind down the road. To be honest with you, it's not even a thought anymore.
What shifted in you?
Sure.
Because your mom said, if it's to be, it's up to you, Josh. Right. This is totally up to you. So something had to trigger. I mean, it would have been so easy for you to take the money and run.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
And you and your family could have rode off into the sunset and went to Isla Mujeres in Mexico and never to be seen or heard of again.
I don't know that I see myself ever not working. Okay?
Correct.
It just, when I'm not busy, I get a little bit of
I get you get
cabin
off track.
fever and all that. But what really happened is, I'm like, I love our people, and I really do love what we do.
Okay.
And it's going to change.
What's it?
Everything.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately they would acquire us and try to make
if
them,
they acquired you, everything would change.
Everything's going to change.
Yeah.
And maybe not even necessarily in a bad way.
Sure.
But I think we had this level of comfort at Nuts and Bolts where we knew each other well.
Familiarity.
And ultimately, I'm going to now be answering to somebody else too.
Right.
Now, I do believe that they would have given us a lot of autonomy.
Sure.
As long as we're turning a profit and making money,
right.
which we have. But I think what it came down to is once this deal is done and you no longer love what you're doing, there's no going back to the way things were in December of 2021. Yeah, once January.
Tell them that again.
Absolutely. Yeah, once it's done, there's no going back to the way things were. And
it's the point of no return.
It is. And then I'm like, and then what if I don't love what I'm doing anymore? Now, here's the other crazy thing. We grew about 20.
What if I don't love what I'm doing anymore? And what if I don't love who I'm doing it with?
Sure.
What have I done to my...
And we had done, I think, as much research as we could do.
Yeah.
And we felt very good.
Yeah, this was a
about them.
months long process.
Yeah, 3, 4, 5 months. In fact, they had even installed a firewall in our system so they could, get numbers. I mean, we were trading numbers back and forth like crazy. And so we didn't end up selling.
Right.
2022, we grew about 25%.
Why?
So
don't give me the I want the nuts and bolts of why.
So,
because it's who we are that determines how well what we do works. It's who we are that determines how we got from here to there.
Yeah.
From 21 to 22.
Right. So in I think
that's what this podcast is about.
Absolutely.
I want the nuts and bolts.
In 2018 or 2019, we picked up the biggest customer we'd had. And I won't say their name, but they're a large irrigation company, huge office here in Omaha, traded on the New York Stock Exchange.
Sure.
Wonderful people. They're in a small town, so they employ a nice chunk of that town. They had a lot of growth. Because the ag business had grown a lot. But we had also been going out, and the thing with businesses, and anyone in business knows this.
Yes.
Say you've got a base of customers. If you're not constantly out there looking for new ones,
Hunting.
your customer base will get smaller, not even because of anything you did wrong. Purchasing agents change. Companies go out of business. There's any number of things. So if you're not constantly out there, and in 2022, a lot of our work just kind of all came around almost all at the same time. We picked up because while we're called Nuts and Bolts Incorporated, we actually have we call it our Global Products Division.
Okay.
So there are a lot of companies out there that they might be taking, say, a nut and a bolt, screwing it into an angle, putting a weld on that angle, maybe putting a handle on here and then doing something. So the way that it works is they're having to buy that bolt, the nut, the angle, have a guy weld it and all that. So we ended up getting connected with some manufacturers around the world and whose quality is just unbelievable.
Okay.
And we said, hey, what if we can sell you that entire assembly? Because here's the thing, they didn't want to have to make it. Their people didn't want to have to make it. They wanted their people to be able to build, their large equipment, not be standing there building these assemblies. And then they only have to give us one purchase order instead of, issuing 5, 6, 7 purchase orders for all of this stuff. We stock them. We find out, hey, how many of these do you use in a year? How about if we keep them on your shelf and you order them as needed? That business blew up for us.
How much did it cost you, if you don't mind I'm asking, to go from what you were doing before? What was the investment to get that finished assembly?
It really depended on what it was. Because there's a large lawnmower.
And money, and I don't mean money necessarily. I mean time, energy, resources, thought energy.
And a lot of warehouse space.
And a lot, really?
A lot of racking.
So we are talking money and square footage.
We are, but we were able to realize the profits from that relatively early. And the good thing about a part like that, because if we go out and we sell a nut and a bolt and all that stuff, I mean, let's be honest, our bolts aren't any better than anyone else's.
Right.
Now, we still do a lot of business with Nucor Fastener here they're in St. Joe, Indiana. They get all their steel from Norfolk, Nebraska. I mean, we sell a ton of domestic materials, but the vast majority of our market from the commodity side is imported materials.
Okay.
We're working with a structural steel contractor right now They're building the Mutual of Omaha building downtown. We're supplying every bolt that's putting up the steel in that building.
Wow.
Every bolt is 100% melted and manufactured in the USA.
Wow, that's awesome.
So there is, without a doubt, a market for that, 100%. And there was a time, not even that many years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where we're like, there will not be a graded fastener in our facility that's not made in America.
Okay.
But it really limited us because all of the big guys out there are importing all of their own stuff. So we decided we would offer a domestic line and an import line.
Okay.
And just things started to happen. So in 2022, and again, if I'm boasting in the Lord. You know, our sales were around $24 million.
Okay, and what's year? 22?
22,
okay.
Yeah. Which for a fastener company with one single location,
yeah, where does that put you guys on the scale?
It's almost unheard of. I mean, we're by far the largest in this area.
Okay, in the Midwest?
Yeah. Now, the company that was going to buy us at that time, between their locations in Mexico and the U.S., were doing around $100 million.
Okay.
Out of 5 locations. They have since picked up some more places. Our business has really gone from a maintenance-based, so we would go after a lot of truck shops, auto repair, a large plant that's doing maintenance. One of our biggest customers back in the 90s and early 2000s was Kellogg's.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're not necessarily making anything with bolts.
Right.
But they're fixing stuff constantly, and using drill bits, grinding wheels, batteries.
That's where my dad worked. He worked at Kellogg's.
Absolutely. So we were looking for large manufacturers like that. And we would obviously take on a Kellogg's again anytime. But we're not necessarily looking for the tractor trailer shops.
Right.
We're looking more for places that are building irrigation equipment, people that are building ag equipment. We do a ton of business in data centers right now. It's funny because they don't want you to say their names, but you know, there's here in Omaha, from here to Lincoln to Council Bluffs.
So you're even just talking locally.
Facebook and Google are going crazy. And we also have a partner, they were based out of Wisconsin. We met up with them at the Google data center over in Council Bluffs, you know, maybe a decade ago. Well, now they ship globally, and we take care of a lot of their kits that they end up sending out to these for installations. That's some great business in unistrut, threaded rod, nuts, bolts, just all kinds of stuff. And you know, the goal is there, get as many electricians in there as you can, get this data center up and operating as quickly as you possibly can. And our thing is this. We'll put it's an overseas container, we call it a Connex. We'll drop a Connex right on the job site. And then one place, when over in Council Bluffs, they were doing 4-story buildings. So we literally had 2 6-foot-tall bin stocks on each floor of that thing. Wow. That we would fill from the Connex on site. And the goal was keep it full. We want our guys to be able to get whatever they can.
And it's full of what?
Nuts, bolts, fittings,
everything.
You name it. I mean, just zip ties. I mean, just everything that they're going to need to use to build that data center.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's been that's been a wonderful piece of business.
So we're at 22 now. Take us 23, 24. Now we're in 25.
And 24, we've grown a little bit, not nearly as much. Maybe more like 7 to 10% a year. It's funny because 25,
a little bit, 7 to 10% a year.
Although 24, believe it or not, we were actually down a little bit from 23. But you know, when you've had 4 or 5 years of good growth, we were not upset about it at all. But what ended up happening was one of the companies that we were making that were building tractor trailers, we were selling them these huge stainless steel clamps, just containers of them at a time. They ended up importing them themselves. So, so that happens. Another couple customers, their business slowed way down. But again, we're out there looking. We ended up, there's a company called Balin out in Columbus. They want all hot dip galvanized fasteners for their metal buildings. They want them all in these square plastic buckets. We started supplying all of them.
Wow.
There's companies out in Grand Island and York and Hastings, Chief Industries. Wonderful, wonderful company. We literally, I don't know how much you know about tariffs, but there's a huge tariff coming from China right now. Tariffs all over the world, but China's got it the worst by far. We had gotten a new contract for the metal building company out in Grand Island. We were literally beat the tariffs by about a month.
So they're a thing? They're coming.
So here's the way tariffs work right now on fasteners, and especially out of China. In 2018, Donald Trump passed a 25% tariff on just about every industrial product coming from China.
Okay.
That stuck, and it's been with us. Well, when he became president this time, he said 10% tariff on everything out of China. Then he said no, 20. So now we're at 45.
Oh, okay.
Then he said 25% tariff on steel and any article made from steel around the globe, including China. So now we're at 70.
Oh, wow.
Here's the crazy thing about that. Even at 70, it's still more beneficial to buy your material from there.
Wow.
So I don't know where we go. And it's unfortunate because the people we don't want it to affect are, we have ag manufacturers that ship to Canada and Mexico quite a bit. We really don't want to sour those relationships because we rely on them. They rely on global stuff. So we'll see. Ultimately, in the end, the man upstairs didn't bring us this far to give up on us. And when the 25 passed in 2018, we were like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? Well, we've grown every year since.
Somehow, some way, all things work together for the good for those that love God and are called according to His purpose.
100%.
So that's enough about nuts and bolts. Unless now, where are you at now?
So now we're
40 employees. You have square foot of
80,000 square feet. And it's strange because we just had to order a bunch more racking and stuff. When we started out, we filled about 60% of the place. We moved in there in 2017.
Okay.
We were on 102nd and J Street till 2007. In 2007, Mom pretty much designed and built a building over off 120th and Centennial, which is just south of Giles. 30,000 square feet, beautiful place, loved it, filled it up. Had to rent warehouse space other places. Moved over here, so 80,000 square feet. Oh, we'll be good to go. Moved in, we were about 60% full. Right about that time, took on this new large irrigation customer, had to put in a bunch more racking. Then eventually we filled it up. Well, now what we wanted to do, we're going to space the pallet racking 16 feet. That way a forklift can go down, turn around completely. Well, now we've had to bring the aisles in and go with narrow aisle forklifts. So, and we just had to place an order for more racking. So
exponential growth.
It's a great problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. It's an expensive one, but a great one to have.
There's a lot of money tied up in inventory, but I mean, we do have customers. Don't get me wrong. But we got a lot of partnerships, and those are probably the people we're focused most on taking care of. That's where a lot of our inventory is dedicated to, and a lot of our warehouse space. Because we know that for the most part, and we said, a purchasing agent can change and all that stuff, but here's the deal. If we take good care of our customers,
tell them.
If we take good care of our customers and we don't screw up and we make them feel important, here's the thing. Anybody can beat anybody in price on a given day. It can't always be about price. Our pricing's as low as anybody else's, but as long as we keep them happy.
And how do you keep a customer happy?
Well, you don't raise their prices for no reason. You make sure that you've always got the inventory on your shelves that you need, and you've got to keep the lines of communication open. So our inside people that are in many cases in charge of receiving the orders, entering the orders, getting them confirmed back. I mean, we get compliments on them all the time. It gets a little trickier when you're talking about a global company that maybe is much bigger, where maybe not all the decisions are made in Omaha, Nebraska. But for the most part, what we do is in many cases an afterthought. Because so the Mutual of Omaha building, they can't build that building without the bolts we're supplying. But that's only about 1% to 2% of the cost of the steel. So it in many cases is an afterthought. We've literally had construction companies come into town, and we always thought, okay, we need to be out selling all these bolts to Hawkins, Kiewit, all these guys. That's not the case. It's the structural steel fabricators that buy them, Paxton Burling, Drake Williams, guys like that. And then they end up getting all the steel to the erector and they put them up because the bolt is part of the steel connection. So a lot of these guys, we've had contractors come into town. They're from, one, for example, they're from Oklahoma City. They come up from there, they're building a building, nothing as big as Mutual of Omaha, something a little smaller. The steel arrives, they forgot to order the bolts. So all of a sudden we're getting a call, hey, can you supply these bolts? And
can you supply 10 million bolts?
Yeah, absolutely. We run them over there. And we've built out-of-state relationships that way. But I guess the point is in many cases, we're an afterthought.
Sure.
You know, I mean, we're as important as any other component in that thing. But as long as we're taking good care of our customer, we don't let them run out of the stuff that they need for their guys to put stuff together, you really got no reason to look anywhere else.
As an afterthought, though, you can use that as leverage.
Oh, sure.
I mean, because now we're down to the nitty-gritty of the project.
Yeah.
And we don't have the stuff that's going to hold everything together.
Right.
So then you can leverage your product.
Can. Now, we're never going to go in and rip anybody off.
But I mean,
we might make a couple more points on that stuff.
But I mean, you can come to the table and solve your problem.
100%. So there are literally guys with a load of steel there, and they don't have a single bolt to put them out with. So,
and we just happen to have them.
Yep, and they found us on Google because they looked for, fastener supplier in Omaha, Nebraska, and here we are.
All right, that's enough about the nuts and bolts company.
Sure.
Now I want to get into the nitty-gritty. I want to get into the nuts and bolts of your journey.
Oh, sure.
JAMIN Josh's journey, the nuts and bolts of that. Now take us back to, this is where I kind of come alive in this, and this is really what this podcast is about.
Sure.
We want to talk about some of the principles, some of the people, principles, places, experiences, exposures you've experienced over the, through this process that's helped you get from where you were to where you are. Tell us a little bit about where you were. Now that we know where you are, we want to start. I wanted to show our audience where you are now, but it isn't where you started.
No. So I graduated in 92.
Okay.
Had a girlfriend.
Are you 50?
I am 50.
Same.
On the button.
Same.
Yeah. So 51 here, and oh shoot, I turned 51 in 2 days. Dang, it's creeping right up on us anymore. But I was raised in a good home. And I mean, I'm in the rooms of recovery now, so I hear about a lot of people that weren't raised in good homes, and you're like, wow, I understand why you turned to drugs and alcohol in your life. I was. But for some reason, I'm not sure why, I stopped trying to figure out why. I just always had this desire to figure out what certain substances did to a person.
Explore.
And it was crazy because in school they told you how dangerous they were.
Right.
And I listened to all that stuff, but I don't think I ever really believed it.
Okay.
But part of me was like, well, no, you make your own decisions. You decide what you're going to do and you move on. In about 97, I went through a pretty bad breakup, and
like relationship?
Yeah,
okay.
Yep. My girlfriend left me, who I'd been with for 4 or 5 years or something like that, and I was really down and out, and a buddy of mine's like, let's go to Guitars and Cadillacs. And I'm like, and it didn't even...
It's coming back. Did you hear that?
I did. It didn't even sound remotely interesting to me, but okay. And we go to Guitars and Cadillacs, and I drank a couple of beers, and no kidding, I felt better.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if that's where it started, because looking back on my life, there were addiction issues. I mean, the signs were there. I mean, I'm skipping school to play video games. I mean, me and my buddies, smoking cigarettes, just doing everything we were not supposed to be doing. And sometimes just because we know we're not supposed to be doing it.
Right.
Then got involved with some friends that liked, to do meth and cocaine. Ooh. And, next thing I know, we're doing meth and cocaine, oxys.
You did meth and cocaine?
Yeah.
What, at what age?
I would have, so I got clean at 25. So this would have probably started when I was around 21 or 22.
Okay.
It started with, we're going to the bar, we're going to have some drinks. We'll
starts with
do a little bit of that. And this is the crazy part is, I remember I had an apartment. It was over off 114th and Maple, and me and 2 of my buddies that I, gone to school with for years and years and years. It would be a Saturday night. We might get a case of beer or something like that. Sit at home, watch. If it was football season, watch football. Well, we'd been out to the bar, and this is one of the things I always tell people. I am not ever a person that is going to tell somebody you shouldn't drink. You shouldn't do whatever. Mm-hmm. If it's a problem for you, then there's help available. But, my opinion is that I'm an addict. And whenever I do something, I usually take it to an extreme, especially if it's a mind-changing, mood-altering substance. So we start doing some meth. We called it crank at the time. And we figured out if we snorted a line of that, we could all seriously drink a case of beer, stay up all night, sleep the day away Sunday, and go to work on Monday.
Wow.
And it was all good, Not the way I was raised or anything. No. And the funny thing is, neither of these 2 guys were raised that way either. But it ended up progressing into, okay, now we've stayed up all night Saturday, let's continue doing it through Sunday, and now try to roll into work on Monday. Now we're missing work on Monday. Now we're doing it all through the week. I eventually became an IV drug user.
Okay, which means what?
Which means injecting into your vein.
So what do you inject into your?
Meth, cocaine, oxy, anything.
Oh,
yeah,
whatever you could.
Whatever, yeah, whatever it is. What you find is that, snorting does get you high.
Okay.
Smoking it gets you high.
Okay.
Injecting it, you get your money's worth. But you get a lot more than you bargained for.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not trying to say that, you're worse off or better off than anybody else, but once you're feeling feelings that God did not make people to feel.
Ooh.
You're feeling pleasures that...
It's kind of like in the garden then.
Sure. Yeah, man was not meant to touch the untouchable. And once you have...
Stay away from the tree. What is the tree of good and evil? Yeah. You can mess with all this other stuff.
Yeah. The tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yes.
And their eyes were open. Well, and here's kind of my thing. I could be a crazy person on certain drugs, but when I drank alcohol, I did things I would have never normally done. And one of the things I did under the influence of alcohol was got myself injected with methamphetamine.
Oh, wow.
So, and once I had kind of crossed that line.
When you say alcohol, are you talking about beer? Are you talking about
just
whiskey?
whatever, just about any of it. I mean, I would usually mix whatever was there. Absolutely.
All the above.
I mean, it could start with a couple of Busch Lights and end with a bottle of Jose or something cheap, something not good.
Mad Dog 2020.
Oh gosh, here's the crazy thing about that. I literally saw somebody post something recently and they listed Mad Dog, Cisco, Boone's Farm,
Southern Comfort,
Strawberry Hill. They listed all of these god-awful things that you could get for like $3 a bottle when I was in my teens, and we'd find somebody and we'd be like, yeah, we're gonna drink a bottle of Mad Dog. We were all puking every time.
Oh,
drink a bottle of Mad Dog, puking, never doing it again. For some reason, next weekend, doing it all over again.
Back at it, just like a dog returning to his vomit.
I was literally just quoting that out of Proverbs yesterday to somebody. That's exactly what it is. But the funny thing is, once the drugs had really taken a hold of me, I really had no desire for the alcohol anymore. It was strange how that worked. And then,
even though the alcohol got you to the drugs.
It did, yep. Lost my apartment, got evicted. Eventually lost my job with my folks.
Oh.
They never really necessarily fired me. I showed up less and less and less. Living out of a car, a 1982 V6 Mustang hatchback. No plates, no insurance, none of that stuff. And that's actually eventually what got me. The police pulled me over enough times.
Okay.
In 97, I did get caught with methamphetamine. Got arrested, went through Douglas County Drug Court, got kicked out of drug court.
So is this your rock bottom moment? Are we there?
So this was 97. This was about 2 years before.
We're not there yet?
We're not there.
Oh, we're going
another
deeper.
2 years, yeah. So 99, got arrested for, I don't even remember what the charges were, but it was always drug related. Okay. Even if I didn't get arrested and charged with possession of a drug, it was always drug related.
You were addicted.
Absolutely. Went to jail, and my life was all about getting and using and finding ways and means to get more. That's all that mattered.
More of
drugs. And it was usually meth, especially in that last year or two.
Because you hear about meth and you hear about people not being able to break away from it. I mean, it's like a...
It's not good, but sometimes going to jail can be a blessing and a curse. And here's what ended up happening. I had been to jail 4 or 5 times and was never having to stay more than a few days, maybe a week. This was November 11th, 1999.
Remember the date,
I do, and it was Veterans Day. Okay. November 12th is Dad's birthday.
Okay.
Once again, I'm calling my mom from jail, asking her to come bail me out because I wanted to be home for Dad's birthday. Now, I hadn't communicated with my folks unless I really needed something for months, really most of probably the last year. And I said, Mom, I would like you to come bail me out. I really want to spend Dad's birthday with him. I had no desire to spend my dad's birthday. I needed to find something that might, and she said something that she hadn't said to me very many times in my life. No.
Oh.
Yeah. I know where you're at, and I know you're safe. And Mom had decided that sooner or later she was going to get a phone call. We need you to come identify your son's body. And she, in her mind, was like, if he's in jail, I know I'm not going to have to come identify his body. And
whether it's Dad's birthday tomorrow or not.
I mean, they probably had a much better Dad's birthday because they didn't have to worry about what I was out there doing. And after being in jail for a few days, you eat. Obviously, the food's not great. Nobody would ever claim it is, but it's better than nothing. You start to eat, you get some sleep, and something occurred to me. And there's a 12-step fellowship, and there's a book. And one of my favorite lines from that book is, we came to realize that if we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to keep getting what we've always got.
That's insanity, right? That's the definition of insanity.
Simple. And I'm tired of going to jail. And I just, and there were other people in jail that seemed to be actually okay with it. I wasn't. I mean, I just did not like being there. So Mom left me there for a couple weeks, and she agreed. So, and here's kind of what happened. After about 9 or 10 days, I was finally, I called Mom just to talk, and I was just like, you know what, I'm okay. I'm okay here. And a couple of days later, she said, I'm going to come get you, but I want you to go to treatment.
You had to get to that, I'm okay here.
Yeah, it was more.
That was the trigger for her to say, okay, now it's time.
I wasn't trying to get out, because if she'd have bailed me out that first day, I'd have been high that night.
And been back.
I might not be alive today, to be honest with you.
The wisdom of the mom.
Oh my gosh. And I know it hurt her to not bail me out.
Especially missing your dad's birthday.
Oh my God. But ultimately, she made the right decision. She'd had enough. And I mean, it was definitely time for some tough love. She picked me up, I think it was on a Saturday morning from jail, took me home, packed a suitcase, and drove to O'Neill, Nebraska.
What's in O'Neill?
Valley Hope.
Valley Hope?
Yeah, Valley Hope.
Rehab?
It is. It's a 30-day program.
Still there?
It is still there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that one.
They've got a very small chapel there that actually used to be a church that they moved onto the grounds.
So different than Teen Challenge?
Different, but I've heard amazing things about Teen Challenge. I don't know a lot of details about it, but I literally have a friend who, I think he just celebrated 9 months clean. He checked into Valley Hope, and he will say all along, they saved my life there. The nurses there are wonderful. They'll, try to get you through any withdrawal you're having. Sure. And ultimately, it's not a lockdown facility. You can walk off if you want. You can have your car there. You can go have lunch in town. The funny thing is, I was in there, so it was November. I'll back up a little bit. This was my second time in Valley Hope.
Oh, okay.
I had been there earlier that year. Yeah, and I was there over St. Patrick's Day. Well, a lot of people from O'Neill claim, so people from Nebraska say O'Neill is the Irish capital of Nebraska.
Okay.
Some people from O'Neill say, no, it's the Irish capital of the United States. Okay. That was the only day they would not let you leave the treatment facility for good reason. Yeah, there would be people that would actually dye their horse green and ride it down the street. It was just a party. So, for good reason. But wonderful place. When I had gotten out of there in March, I was sure that I was going to stay clean. And I got out. I went to some 12-step meetings. I'm like, you know what? I feel pretty good. I don't even have the desire to do drugs right now. I don't need to go to these meetings. And, one of the things that I've learned today is God heals people. 100% heals people. I mean, even in my own family, I remember my grandma's cancer completely disappeared one time.
Physical healing.
Literally.
Emotional healing.
Absolutely. But I feel like for people like me, He gives us a daily reprieve. Whatever it was that God healed me from today, I got to wake up tomorrow morning and ask Him to heal me again.
He'll heal you again.
And He will. That's the reason why people in recovery say you do it just for today. It's one day at a time. It's all of that stuff. sometimes even today, while I certainly have goals and all of that stuff, I'm not going to sit here and promise you I'll absolutely be clean in 10 years. Right. Now, do I plan to be? Absolutely. But I don't have to worry about that.
No.
And especially when you're new, people will be like, oh my gosh, I got to do this for the rest of my life. I said, no. You don't have to do it the rest of your life. Do it today.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's it right there.
Set a goal to do it once you wake up tomorrow morning.
One day at a time.
But, it's a buddy of mine. He's like, your only goal today is to get in bed and close your eyes without putting one in you. And absolutely, man.
When you break it down like that, it makes it simple. I mean,
you got to. Yeah. People like, even humans, and humans are inherently broken. That's who we are. Some of us are more broken than others. But if you've struggled with addiction, I don't know if you cross a line, if you're born into it, whatever it is. I tried figuring that out for a long time. Was I born an addict? Certainly there were signs there. Or did I just use drugs for so long that I became addicted to them? Today, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's like, I know I am one.
Right.
And I know what I need to do. We've got an illness, a disorder. In the same way that a diabetic needs to take insulin to keep their blood sugar under control, there are some things I need to do to keep my addiction under control. And, that involves for me going to 12-step meetings, heavily involved in my church. I've got friends. I don't go to places where people are getting high.
Right.
Now, that's not to say I don't go to a bar and grill every once in a while and all that. It's not a temptation for me. If it is, somebody should obviously stay out of there. I've got a friend of mine who he's struggling like crazy, and he'll stay sober for a couple days, but he'll be in the gas station and sell those 99-cent shooters.
Oh,
and
man.
He just is drawn to them like a moth to a flame. And I'm hoping he gets this sooner or later. I know he wants it. He's about as broken as I've seen a person before. But it doesn't matter whether I was genetically predisposed to becoming an addict or whether I used and became one.
Right.
I am one, and I know what I got to do today to not be one anymore. And I was literally having a conversation with a friend yesterday. Maybe it was today. And she was like, I was at the gym, so I spent a decent amount of time at the gym, and I've got some relationships there that are just wonderful. And it's really we really get emotional support while we're there, because once you get to know somebody, you realize that there is a benefit in talking and letting people know what's going on with you. And one of these people had a sister that passed away maybe within the last 5 years. And she said, with my sister, anytime she stopped drinking, she was the most miserable person that you could have ever known. But she was miserable while she was drinking too. And there's actually a word for that. People call it a dry drunk. But the problem is, if you stop using the substance, you're left with this gaping hole. Now, the substance never filled the hole either. You just feel like you need to fill it with something.
Covered it up.
And if you don't fill that hole with a relationship with God, with a fellowship of people that are
community.
And, there's another saying, you got to change your playgrounds, playmates, and playthings.
Hold on, change your
playgrounds, playmates, and playthings.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're, I'm not going to drink, but I'm going to hang out with drunks.
Right.
Well,
eventually,
you keep going to the barbershop. Sooner or later, you're going to get your hair cut.
Or keep going to the chiropractor event.
Absolutely.
Stay in contact with the roofer. Eventually, you're going to get a new roof.
And there's a saying too, because there are a lot of people in my life that I really want to help, and I will help anybody.
Sure.
But I'm not going to go into the belly of the beast to help somebody. And there's an old saying, and I'm pretty secure in my recovery. I've celebrated 25 years back in November, and things are pretty good, but I still know that I don't want to tempt it too much.
Yeah.
And I've seen too many times where an addict caught up in addiction will bring a clean addict down long before a clean addict will bring a dirty addict up.
Which means what?
Which means sometimes we have to love them from a distance.
Oh.
Yeah. And here's the thing, I'll always take a phone call from somebody.
Sure.
I'll always meet somebody at a 12-step meeting. But I'm not going to meet you down at a dope house.
Right. Just not gonna do it.
Yeah. And I'm not going to probably waste too much of my time and energy trying to help someone who doesn't want to be helped.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of your story.
Sure.
How would you say that those temptations, those trials, those tests, those tribulations has equipped you for the new role that you assumed when your dad passed away.
Sure.
How did that go into you saying, no, I don't want to sell the company?
Right.
You know, how did what you learned through the refiner's fire?
Sure. So one way that we've always done business, even when my dad was around, was with a lot of honesty. While we do sign some contracts from time to time, most all of our business is done with a handshake.
Okay.
I said we do have some customers, but we have more partnerships than that. First, I didn't want to lose those partnerships, and a lot of the relationships that I built with our employees and even with some of our customers, a lot of the, I'm not saying I'm a wise person, but the little bit of wisdom I have, I've almost always picked up in, a 12-step meeting. I don't want to say too much because there are, traditions where, we maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films, and I suppose this would be considered film. But a lot of the principles that I've lived my life by and that we've run our business with were learned in church, in the 12-step fellowships that I'm a part of, honesty and integrity. And any time you operate outside of those things, there's a price to pay. And that doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of people put their trust in us.
Yes.
We literally had a customer that's building data centers right now, buy a bunch of material from us about 5 years ago and had us warehouse it. And finally, my manager's like, dude, this stuff's been sitting here. Can you ask them to take it? Now, here's the deal.
5 years?
We could, first off, they didn't even know about it. The personnel has changed and everything. We could have taken that material, sold it to somebody else. We could have scrapped it. We could have done anything. It's like, no, man, they bought that stuff.
Yeah.
And literally this week, we're going to deliver it over to them.
Oh, wow.
But which also means we can't
5
sell
years
that
later?
material. Yeah, yep. It was crazy because it was during COVID, and there were a lot of supply shortages at that time. And we're like, hey, man, we've got an opportunity to buy all this material, but we're going to need you to pay for it, but we'll hang on to it until you need it. And then, a lot of things happened. And to be honest, even on our end, we'd kind of forgotten we had it. But there are situations where we could operate dishonestly. There's always going to be a price to pay for that.
Yes, eventually.
Eventually, even if nobody ever finds out, I know.
Yes.
And that stuff will eat me up.
And when I lay my head on the pillow at night, I'm trying to sleep.
I fall asleep pretty easily these days, but that's going to cost me some. It's going to cost you something. And it doesn't mean, if I rip a customer off, now all of a sudden I'm going to go out and start using drugs again.
Right.
But it's a step closer.
Sure.
It's never just one big major incident that happens that sends somebody back out into relapse. Usually what happens a lot of times was what happened to me quickly the first time. My life's pretty good. Or, boy, I'm so busy. And we've got a company to run. I've got a wife. I've got 3 kids.
Right.
Now, my oldest, Danielle's 23. She's moved out on her own. She's a wonderful, wonderful kid. But Layla's, in competitive dance.
Yeah, she's how old is she?
Yeah, she's 12.
Oh, 12,
Ben's 17. He'll be 18 next month, and he's getting ready to graduate high school. And good kid. When he graduates, he's actually going to have his associate's degree because he's literally right now in honors calculus.
Is he going to be a part of the company then, or what do you?
Eventually, probably, but I would really like him to figure something else out first. With me, I was. I'm not saying it was a great job, but I was managing a Subway restaurant for a few years. So I did kind of have to prove that I had something. Of course, I fell off the deep end a few years later and had to build that back up again. But even if you look through Scripture, every time God uses somebody, they were always somebody that was broken. And in some cases, they were people that were committing evil acts. Saul, who became Paul, persecuting Christians.
Right.
I mean, even David, a man after God's own heart, screwed up time after time after time with Bathsheba and, had Uriah killed and all of these things, but God is able to use them. I was married once, so when I had about 6 months clean, went to a Friday night 12-step meeting.
Okay.
And this 12-step meeting was a good one, but it was a big one, and it was kind of more of a place to meet people. And I met
mingle.
And I met this woman, and we started dating, and we started having sex when we shouldn't have been, and she ends up getting pregnant, and we end up getting married,
wow.
and bought a home together, and Danielle was born in 2001, and I got clean in 99. So the blessing is, my kids have never had to see me under the influence of anything. And then our marriage eventually fell apart. She relapsed, and it was a pretty difficult time. But even through those mistakes, God blessed me with this amazing daughter, put me in a position to meet my wife, Hannah, who, when Danielle was, I think, 8 years old, adopted Danielle.
Oh, okay.
Mom kind of just fell off the face of the earth, which a lot of people do when they're on drugs. It screws up your priorities. It 100% does. And she is not a bad person, but she's a sick person. And so yeah, Hannah comes in. We have Ben, we have Layla. She adopts Danielle, and Danielle is mom, or Hannah is mom to Danielle. Yeah. In fact, kind of, I wouldn't say it upsets me, but I'm like, she hangs out with Hannah and talks to her way more than she talks to me.
Right.
They have this amazing relationship, but once again, if you look back, if I would have put together a list of all the things that I really wanted out of life, if I got clean, I would have sold myself short. God didn't give me like this old life back. I feel like he blessed me with a brand new life. I play guitar at church.
Yeah.
Started attending, and my relationship with Christ really started a few years after I got clean. My relationship with Christ really started when I was going through that divorce.
Okay.
And I was starting to feel that emptiness again. And while I always knew there was a God, I had never, and we grew up going to church, but it was very traditional. We sang hymns and all of that stuff, which, hey, nothing wrong with that. But I never had a personal relationship with Christ. So going through that heartache, my aunt and uncle went to a church. It was called Flatland Church. Pastor Bart Wilkins, wonderful man. Started going there, and I'd played guitar, although I'd never really been in a band. I just kind of played on my own and enjoyed it enough. Decided to join the worship team there, and in about 4 years went through 4 or 5 different worship leaders, but I enjoyed playing with all of them. One of them was named Ben Schaefer. He had come from a band called 10th Hour Calling. He actually heads an organization in Omaha called the 402 Arts Collective. 402 Arts Collective. Yep. And they just, their newest facility is out at Lakeside. They've got one in Benson, which was the original, I think one in Bellevue as well. Anything to do with the arts, from actual art, but a lot of music.
Oh, okay.
They put on a Christmas program over at, I think it's Relevant Church out in Elkhorn, right before Christmas. Amazing, man. Just a concert, straight up jam. And Ben is probably one of my favorite people, but he really introduced me to what it means to actually use your music for worship.
Oh, okay.
When we had left Flatland Church, not because anything went wrong or anything, part of it, to be honest with you, was we lived across town and wanted to have something a little bit closer that our kids could be involved in. And in 2012, we started going to Stony Brook Church. Hannah actually knew somebody from Stony Brook Church, and her name's Melissa Hannah. She's a wonderful woman. She's pretty much the glue that holds the whole thing together. I think every church, has a Melissa Hannah there. And went there for a few months, didn't really say anything, and then I don't know if I brought it up. I think Hannah might have mentioned to her friend, "Hey, Josh is a guitar player." So next thing I know, I'm auditioning for the worship team.
Oh, there you go. Now you're in there.
Yeah, Kristen, our worship leader, and this is almost unheard of. Kristen has been the worship leader at that church since they started in 2011, and we're in 2025 now. So I started playing there in 2012.
Okay.
Still have the same drummer. Still have the same worship leader. The worship leader's husband is also an acoustic guitar player. He plays once or twice a month. So I've really been playing with most of the same people. Our bass player there is a friend of mine named Jeff. He and I were actually started a recovery band together in 2006.
Okay.
It ended up going into, and our singer was also in recovery, and our drummer fell off. Jeff and I ended up kind of having a falling out, but we ended up playing places like the Chrome, the Anchor Inn, when the Anchor Inn was down by the river. It had good times, but we were able to do it without having to put substances in our bodies.
You talked about the Lord being the healer.
Yeah.
He's in the God's in the healing business, and he heals people, whether physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and I'm thinking of what role music has played in your healing over the years.
Well, literally, I start playing guitar at Flatland Church, and I was ultimately saved there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
okay.
I mean, it brought it might have been even a little bit, no, I think I pretty much started playing right away. When I was baptized, while I was there, it just was many times when I've felt closest to the Lord has been when I've been broken.
Oh, yeah.
And I was broken, man. I mean, I was suffering, and I've got a lot of friends in recovery, and when you're in recovery, you have a sponsor. And my sponsor is a guy named John. He's, I think, 75 or 76 years old. He looks amazing, very active in recovery. He still goes down to the Omaha Correction Center, takes meetings into there, into the prisons and stuff. But even he told me, because he had gone through his divorce his first year clean and sober, he said, I've lost family members when I've been in recovery, but nothing compares to the affairs of the heart and those relationships. And I got to say, the most pain I've probably gone through, clean, maybe even when I was not clean, was the divorce I went through. And God came to me right in that moment. I mean, it says, even the book of Revelation says he'd stand at the door and knock, and he'd been knocking at that door for a long time. I feel like even when I wasn't looking to him for what I needed, he was setting things up in my life.
Intentionally.
Yeah. My mom and her church and my dad and my family had been praying for me. And you know what? I'm a believer that prayer works, and I don't believe you can necessarily pray for somebody and make them change your mind because of their prayer, but I think that God can put situations in their life that'll give them a choice, whether or not they want to make that change or not. And I feel like my mom prayed me into recovery. I really do. And she's still one of those prayer warriors. Oh, yeah. 100%. And through my brokenness, they had grown up wherever we lived. We had to find the First Methodist Church.
Okay.
Because of, it's funny because I obviously can't take credit for it. I caused them pain. But because of that pain, I think they needed something more that they weren't getting. And they started looking for other places. And I can remember seeing my dad worship. I think I talked about this at his funeral one time. We were singing, Behold, he comes riding, Days of Elijah.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, I saw him in a way that I would have never seen him when I was growing up in church. You stood up, you sang the songs you're supposed to sing, and you sit down, and you didn't talk about church after that.
Outside of church.
Yep. But to see him smiling and actually even having a good time worshiping God, I'm like, man, God, you really do take broken people and broken situations and turn them into something good.
Turn it around.
He's got a way of doing that for people, And it's funny because you don't see it when you're in the middle of it.
No. What do they say? If you're catching hell, don't hold on. If you're going through hell, don't stop.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, trial by fire for sure. And the thing is, we usually create our own problems, or at least in my life. There are obviously innocent victims out there all the time, but for the most part, we reap what we sow.
But I mean, I don't think you could be the person you are today if you hadn't been through that refiner's fire.
I don't think so
Through
either.
that process, I mean.
I was a very bitter kid growing up, and I don't even know where
for no reason.
No reason at all. I did not like the world, and here's the thing. I didn't like anybody who was different than me. I was a racist. I was homophobic. I was all of these things for no reason. I'd never been done wrong by anybody. You know what it ultimately was? Is I disliked myself so much that I projected that onto and out. Because here's the thing. Not only did I dislike people that were different than me, I didn't like people that were the same as me.
Right. I didn't like me.
So yeah. So, and if you have no love for yourself, it's going to be very difficult. And then, so getting clean and spending a lot of time with, African American people, Latino people, homosexual people, and doing it in an atmosphere where you're not going to judge somebody.
Right, you're just loving people.
Well, and where they're not going to judge you, because here's the thing, man, our goal is to get clean and to stay clean.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, so my dad grew up in right outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And, you know, I don't want to disparage my grandfather, but there is no secret, my grandfather was a bit of a racist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happened was, eventually my dad did have a conversation with him saying, I'd appreciate it if you didn't, you know,
Sure.
say that stuff around my kids. I ultimately think that came from his time over in Vietnam.
Okay.
And I think what some people discover is it really doesn't matter what color your skin is.
Right.
Everybody bleeds red.
Hey,
and yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah. And you know, some of the people that, you know, I was literally having lunch today with, you know, a guy that I sponsor. He's in his mid-70s, African-American man. I've known him for over 20 years. You know, got a good relationship with the Lord. And somebody who had really helped him, her name's Sherry, just a wonderful, wonderful woman, who opens and runs houses for, you know, people that are trying to transition out of prison. She just opened her first women's house for women that are, you know, have suffered with addiction, trying to get their kids back. And I mean, she does everything by the book, because if you give an addict even a recovering 1 inch, they'll try to take a mile.
They'll take it and run with it.
Yeah,
huh?
so I mean, there are requirements to live in these places. You know, no substance abuse. You know, attending church and attending meetings and all of that stuff. You know, there's a wonderful program that they run called Overcomers. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but great program, which really incorporates recovery from addiction with building a relationship with the Lord at the same time.
Awesome.
So, you know, in other 12-step fellowships, you refer to God of our understanding, you know, higher power, all of these things.
In general.
And there is a good reason for that. You know, many people have grown up in a, you know, what was supposed to be a godly home, but it ended up being an abusive home. So they might not have a really good idea of who a loving God is. And allowing them to come to that realization on their own a lot of times can be a really good idea. Now, here's the thing. I do a sermon at Stony Brook Church 2 or 3 times a year. You know, I play on the worship team pretty much every Sunday. Kristen does give everyone a Sunday off a month. They do an acoustic Sunday. But I'm not going to sit in a 12-step meeting and preach. Pretty much everyone knows I'm a Christian. I mean, that's the thing. If somebody ever wanted to have a discussion with me after the meeting about who God is and what I believe, I'll have that conversation all day long.
I think it goes, preach the gospel at all times, but use words only when necessary.
That's one of my lines. Absolutely, man. You've got, and it doesn't mean that we don't ever use words.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're using words and carrying yourself in a completely and totally ungodly way, like a lot of the homes these kids grew up in, a lot of people grew up, you know, you're going to go to church on Sunday, you're going to go to church on Wednesday, and, you know, then every time outside of the church, dad's hitting the bottle and beating his kids. Well, you're kind of carrying a message that doesn't really jive with what we're hearing over in the church, too.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, allowing people to come to their own understanding, but being part of the worship team at Stony Brook Church, and the pastor pretty much gives Kristen and us total autonomy.
Right.
It's funny too, because every once in a while we'll do like a summer concert outside, and you know, we've done some you know, Lady Gaga, Bradley Cooper. We did Shallow. You know, a couple months ago here we did Higher by Creed on a Wednesday evening thing that we had. So we really do, but most of what we're playing are modern, you know, Hillsong, Elevation Worship.
Sure, you bet.
A lot of, it's refreshing that there's a lot of good worship music today.
Absolutely.
You know, you look back in the 80s and even in the 90s.
Wait, you got something against Stryper?
Well, no, but boy, you were really limited. And I'll be honest, I was never a big fan of Stryper. They were fine. And I love the story of how they came to the Lord and what they ended up doing with it. And the fact that they're still an active band 40 years later is amazing.
Right.
But there was a time where if you wanted to listen to worship music, you had to kind of search high and low for the good stuff. I find myself listening to stuff today. And I'm like, I really actually want to hear it.
Yeah,
you know,
and it keeps getting better and better and better.
And I mean, you know, churches are devoting teams to, you know, writing these songs. You know, The Blessing by Carrie Joe. I mean, came right from Scripture. And so Carrie Job and her husband, Cody Carnes, had gotten together with the people at Elevation Worship, Pastor Steve Fertigan, those guys, and they were going to write a song. And they spent, the whole day writing a song, and they never really felt like they'd written something they appreciated. And the next day they got together and they went to Scripture and they wrote the blessing in a few minutes. And it became one of the biggest songs of 2020 or 2021, right when we're coming out of COVID. And you've got these wonderful people whose desire is to write music and to be able to write music so that they and us can worship the Lord together. Yeah, and there's power in that.
There's power, there's healing in that. There's healing in music, there's healing in worship. As we close, what would you say to somebody who, they're trying to figure out how to get from rock bottom to head above water, or to see the light, some kind of light at the end of the tunnel?
Sure.
What would you say to encourage somebody to help them get from where they are to where God's calling them, or where they see themselves going? Or
you bet. Well, so some people, I've got a friend who, he checked into detox. He woke up the next morning and he never had a desire to drink again.
Okay.
That's most
the exception.
People. They're the exception. So if you're waiting for that, many people, it's baby steps. A guy I was on the phone with last night, and this dude's suffering. I mean, he was sobbing, and he said, I keep treating my mom and my stepdad like garbage, and he's 30 years old and everything. And so I said, okay, how many meetings are you going to? Well, and I said, do you ever talk in these meetings? He's like, no, I'm usually sitting in the back waiting to leave. I said, here's the thing. Somebody told me early on, you only got to change one thing, everything. So I said,
that narrows it down.
Yeah. So I said, no more sitting in the back of the room, sit in the front of the room. I said, I'll be honest with you, as much as you struggle not buying a bottle of whiskey or something at the gas station, I feel like you need to be in a treatment facility. Now, here's the thing. I don't have the answer for everybody.
Right.
But not reaching out for help and continuing to do the same thing never works. And I get a lot of calls on, we have a 12-step helpline.
Sure.
And I'll answer a lot of calls from parents. And they're like, what do I do? And in many cases, they've been allowing the person to live in their house and continue acting the same way over and over and over again. And that thing, if we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to keep getting what we've always got.
Result.
Nothing changes, nothing now. And here's the problem with that. There is no textbook way to say, if you follow these steps, they will get help.
Right.
What I can tell people is, if you allow them to continue living that way, they will never change. Here's the problem. If you kick them out of the house, they might die. But if you leave them where they're at, they're definitely going to die.
Oh,
so
that's kind of like back to what your mom.
It is that tough love. It doesn't always work, but that's the only chance people have. So for anybody that's really caught up in addiction, even if you're early on, you always say, don't get started. Great advice.
Sounds good.
Yeah, the Just Say No campaign when I was growing up and everything, I certainly, said all of the things, but, deep down inside, I knew what I wanted to do. There is more help available today than there has ever been. There are places that people can go, even somewhere as, centrally located in the downtown area as the Sienna Francis House. They've got a wet side and a dry side. They've got something called the Miracles Program. I know people who have gone through that Miracles Program, and they've been clean for years.
Right.
The Stevens Center, the Heroes Program, amazing program. There's a lot of places that people can go for help, but ultimately, a lot of times it comes down to a decision, and it was what I heard in this guy's voice last night. He's sick and tired of being sick and tired.
That's it. Yeah. Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah. And most people get to the point to where, I'm like, so you go to the gas station, you buy a bottle, you drink that bottle. Does it make you feel good? Absolutely not. It makes him feel like garbage. But he just can't stop. And I could relate to that. And I believe that had I not gotten arrested that day, I've kind of got a saying when I'm out with, a supplier or something. Everyone close to me knows I don't drink or do drugs. But when it's not somebody, if they ever ask me why, I'll be like, man, I'm allergic. Every time I drink, I break out in handcuffs. You know? but I keep it low key because I want people around me to be able to have a couple drinks.
Sure.
It does not bother me in the least. But if it did, I need to not put myself around those people. I've been doing this for quite a few years, so you know, I'm pretty secure in my stuff. I'm very active in the 12-step fellowship that I'm a part of. Very active in my church. You know, I try to live this honest life, but you know, ultimately, there is help out there. All we need to do is reach out. There's a number that anybody can call, and it's 211. And that is the number. 211. Okay. That's the number for the United Way. Okay. And so when I'm working the 12-step hotline, since we don't necessarily make recommendations, people be like, where should I go to treatment? Well, there's an implied endorsement if I tell you where to go. But I'm like, call 211, even though it is the United Way. We're not affiliated, but they are set up to help people. They can help people find recovery houses, sober living houses, treatment facilities. I mean, they'll help, you know, abused women, which a lot of times abused women and addiction can go hand in hand as well. I've seen some people, here's the thing. I don't decide who makes it anymore because I was wrong way too many times. I would see somebody come in, seem to have their life together and everything, and they seem to fail every time. I would see somebody come in and be like, oh my gosh, they ain't gonna make it. You know, they have no idea. And then all of a sudden you see a light come back. Women, you know, staying clean for a couple of years that lost their kids to the system, now they got them back. And I'm a sucker for a success story, man. I mean, I love that kind of stuff. Oh, yeah, who doesn't? And, you know, it's funny because after I went through Valley Hope, they have something there on the first Friday of every month, and it's called Renewal Day. And if you've been through treatment there, you can go back for a day of treatment. Okay. And I formed some relationships there that were wonderful. And we went to quite a few of those the first couple of years. And those counselors said, we need this. We need to see that people are having success in their recovery because you know, that's what we're here to do. I mean, those guys are not, you know, knocking down a ton of money or anything like that, but being able, and the other thing about addiction is it does not discriminate. I mean, you know, there's doctors, lawyers, it could be anything from, you know, a lady seeing multiple doctors for prescriptions, to somebody literally selling their body, to somebody holding somebody up. I mean, the gamut
addicted to sugar, one of the biggest.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that you know what? It's funny today because in the 12-step fellowship, you don't actually relapse unless you've, you know, used certain substances. But I'm going to tell you right now, I rely on my coffee in the morning, man. I mean, that's the thing. Now, am I ever going to knock over a gas station or a bank to get coffee? No. But yeah, there are certain things in life where I still look at myself and I'm like, you know, you might be recovering, but you're still an addict.
That's it. Hey, well, I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing your story.
This was amazing.
I appreciate everything, you know, everything you've been through and being vulnerable, sharing your story with us and letting us know that, you know, there is hope.
You bet.
We see you now, but this isn't who you've always been.
Oh my gosh. No.
You've had to go through some trials, some temptations, some tribulation to get from, you know, where you were to where you are. And we're just thankful that you're here now and that you shared your story with us. So I don't know, maybe you can finish it with, can you do some Creed? Can you do higher?
You know, I probably could. Let me see here. That one starts clean and it's something like this.
Oh, there you go. That's awesome.